Lina sat on the edge of her bed, her phone feeling heavy in her tired hands. The silence in her small room was overwhelming, but her thoughts were even bigger, swirling around her, making the space feel tight and suffocating. Notifications kept flashing on her screen, messages from her family, each one a little reminder of the upcoming wedding. They weren't being mean, not really, but every message felt like a weight pressing down on her. Everyone expected her to show up with someone impressive, someone successful, someone who would prove that her life was on the right track. She knew exactly how these family gatherings went. The polite smiles, the carefully worded questions that were really just judgments in disguise, the quiet, appraising glances. She'd been through it all before, and the memory of feeling so small, so inadequate, was something she desperately wanted to avoid this time. It wasn't just about showing up alone. It was about the story her solitude seemed to tell everyone else. Years ago, she had been deeply in love. He was a good man, kind, honest, full of dreams that shone in his eyes. But he was poor, and when life got tough, when the practicalities of a future together seemed impossible, Lina had made a choice. She chose security over love. She walked away from him, convincing herself it was the smart, rational thing to do. Love, she had told herself over and over, wasn't enough to build a life on. But in the quiet moments of the night, when the rest of the world was asleep, regret was a constant visitor, whispering what-ifs in her ear. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her best friend. "Don't you dare go to that wedding alone," it read, followed by a laughing emoji. "Just borrow a man for the day if you have to." It was a joke, but it wasn't. And the idea, planted half in jest, started to take root in Lina's mind. It lingered far longer than a simple joke should have. Driven by a strange mix of curiosity, desperation, and a deep sense of shame, she found herself opening a website she'd only ever heard about in hushed, mocking conversations. It was a site for renting dates, for hiring temporary partners who would play the part of a perfect lover for an event. Her heart pounded in her chest as she scrolled through the profiles. Men in tailored suits, men with dazzling smiles, all promising to be the perfect accessory for a day. The prices were astronomical, completely out of her reach. Each one was a stark reminder of her own financial struggles. She was just about to close the tab, to dismiss the whole ridiculous idea, when one offer stopped her cold. It seemed too good to be true, almost like a glitch in the system. The listing read, "Luxury boyfriend. 1 full day. All expenses covered." Lina stared at the screen, certain it was a mistake. She refreshed the page, her finger hovering over the button. But the offer was still there. The profile picture showed a man in a dark, well-fitted suit. There was something different about him, something that pulled her in. Without giving herself another second to overthink it, she tapped the hire button. A nervous laugh escaped her lips. It was only $2, she reasoned. What was the worst that could happen? It was probably a scam, and nothing would come of it anyway. But then, almost instantly, a confirmation message popped up on her screen. "Booking confirmed. Please be ready in 1 hour." Her nervous laughter died in her throat. A wave of panic washed over her. What had she just done? An hour later, Lina was standing outside her small house, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was dressed for the wedding, her hands clammy, her mind racing. This was insane. She was waiting for a $2 fake boyfriend to show up. Then she heard the low, smooth purr of an expensive engine. A sleek, black luxury car, polished to a mere shine, pulled up and stopped right in front of her gate. It was real. Everything suddenly felt very, very real. Her breath hitched. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, moving with an easy, powerful grace that screamed confidence. The black suit he wore fit him like a second skin. And then, he lifted his head, and his eyes met hers. In that instant, Lina felt the world tilt on its axis. Her heart didn't just stop. It felt like it shattered. Memories, locked away for so long, came rushing back like a tidal wave. Late-night conversations filled with shared dreams. Gentle promises whispered in the dark, the warmth of his hand in hers. In the cold, gut-wrenching moment she had turned and walked away from all of it. The man standing in front of her, the man from the $2 profile, looked at her with a calm, unreadable expression. There was no surprise in his eyes, no emotion at all. "Lina," he said. His voice was low, steady, and achingly familiar. "I'm Leo." That voice. It sent a shiver down her spine. It was a voice she had once known better than her own. A voice she had replayed in her dreams and thought she would never, ever hear again in real life. Lina forced a smile onto her face, a fragile mask of composure. She had to pretend she was calm, pretend this was just a business transaction, pretend her entire past wasn't standing just a few feet away. looking at her like a complete stranger. Leo, her ex-boyfriend, the man she had left because he was poor, was now her rented millionaire date. He opened the passenger door for her with a polite, detached gesture, like a chauffeur doing his job. As Lina slid into the plush leather seat, the scent of the car rich and new felt alien and incuting, the car pulled away from the curb, moving smoothly down the street, and the silence inside felt heavier than anything she had ever known. It was a silence filled with years of unsaid words, of regret, of questions she was too terrified to ask. She had paid $2 for a fantasy, a way to survive one difficult day. But as she sat beside him, stealing glances at his strong profile, a terrifying thought began to form in her mind, twisting her fear and confusion into a single, chilling question. This wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. What if Leo wasn't just a stranger playing a part? What if the man she had once deemed not good enough had returned, deliberately, as someone so far out of her reach that she could never touch him again? The wedding suddenly seemed like the least of her problems. The real drama was just beginning. The car glided through the city streets, a picture of perfect calm. But inside, Lina's world was a whirlwind. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a stark contrast to the smooth ride. She sat bolt upright, hands twisted together in her lap, her gaze fixed on the blur of buildings outside. She was trying so hard to pretend she wasn't aware of the man beside her. Leo. He seemed completely at ease, relaxed, as if this were just another Tuesday. For him, maybe it was. But for Lina, the silence between them was suffocating, thick with memories she'd spent years trying to erase. Every few seconds, her eyes would betray her, darting towards him for a stolen glance. The sharp angle of his jaw, the quiet confidence in his posture, the almost unconscious rhythm of his fingers tapping against his thigh. It was all so painfully familiar. Her mind waged a war with her heart. This man was the epitome of success. He was wealthy, polished, radiating a quiet power. The boy she once knew, the boy she had loved, had been broke but full of dreams. His brow always creased with worry about making rent. They couldn't be the same person. It was impossible. The tension became unbearable. Finally, Lina shattered the silence. "So, what are the rules?" she asked, her voice sounding thin even to her own ears. Leo turned to face her, his movements slow and deliberate. His expression was placid, but his eyes were distant, guarded. "The rules are simple," he said. "Act natural. Smile when the cameras are on you. And please, no personal questions." The words were polite, but the tone was all business, firm and cold. It created a chasm between them. Lina managed a small nod, suddenly feeling diminished, like a child being given instructions. She tried to inject some levity into the situation, to bridge the gap. "Well, this is officially the weirdest date I've ever been on," she quipped, attempting a light-hearted laugh. Leo offered a small, polite smile in return, but it was hollow. It didn't reach his eyes. And that empty smile, that polite dismissal, hurt more than any harsh word ever could. It was like a door being gently but firmly closed in her face. As they drove, Lina couldn't help but notice the way other drivers and pedestrians looked at them, at him. People at traffic lights would stare, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and respect. This wasn't just an act he was putting on for her benefit. This was his reality. Leo was a man accustomed to being seen, to being admired. He commanded attention without ever asking for it. This was his world now, a world so far removed from the one she had left him in. Her phone buzzed, vibrating against her leg. A stream of messages poured in from her family. "Can't wait to meet your mystery man." One read, "He sounds amazing. Lina, send a pic," said another. Her fingers trembled as she typed back short, vague replies. "Soon, you'll love him." Each word felt like another brick in the wall of lies she was building around herself. She was walking into a charade, and she was terrified it was about to collapse. The car paused at a red light, and in that momentary stillness, Lina found a sliver of courage. She had to know. "Where are you from?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Leo didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. He chose his words with precision. "I built my life from the ground up, piece by piece," he said evenly. "I prefer not to dwell on the past." His answer wasn't just a deflection. It felt like a warning, a line drawn in the sand. "Don't go there." Lina swallowed, the lump in her throat feeling like a stone. The past. The past was all she could think about. It was screaming inside her head, replaying a scene she had tried so hard to forget. The memory was vivid, burning with shame. She saw herself, younger, standing on a cracked pavement, her voice steady as she delivered the final blow. She remembered telling a heartbroken young man that love wasn't enough, that his dreams couldn't pay the bills, that a future with him was a risk she wasn't willing to take. She remembered the look of devastation in his eyes, a pain so deep it stole his voice. And she remembered how he had simply nodded, accepting her decision without a fight, without begging her to stay. He had let her go. That memory was a ghost that had haunted her for years, and now it felt like it was sitting right next to her. Suddenly, Leo's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, low and controlled. "Relax," he said softly. "You look tense. People will notice." Before she could process his words, he moved his hand and gently placed it over hers, where they rested in her lap. The gesture was fleeting, just long enough to appear convincing to any outside observer, but the contact was electric. A jolt shot up her arm, a wave of warmth that was both achingly familiar and utterly terrifying. Her heart hammered against her chest. Instinctively, she pulled her hand away as if she'd been burned. "Sorry," she stammered, her face flushing. Leo didn't flinch, didn't say a word. He just turned his head back towards the window, but for a split second, she saw it. A flicker of something in his eyes. A darkness, a brief storm that passed as quickly as it came. And then it was gone. His mask of cool indifference perfectly back in place. But she had seen it. That single, unguarded moment confirmed her deepest, most paralyzing fear. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't some stranger she had hired online. There was a story between them, a book she thought she had closed, and he was a chapter she had never truly finished. As the car turned into the long, winding driveway of the wedding venue, a grand estate shimmering with lights, Lina felt a strange shift inside her. The anxiety about her family, about the lies she would have to tell, it all faded into the background. A much larger, more profound fear took its place. She was no longer afraid of being caught in a lie. She was afraid of the truth. She was terrified that the man sitting beside her, the man whose touch still tingled on her skin, wasn't pretending at all. She was terrified that fate, in its cruel and ironic way, had just brought her face to face with the one ghost she could never outrun. The past she had so carelessly thrown away was now her present, and she had no idea how to escape. The moment Lina and Leo stepped out of the car at the wedding hall, every eye turned toward them. A wave of silence rippled through the entrance, before erupting into a low murmur of whispers. Lina felt the air shift, charged with curiosity and envy. The venue was a spectacle of bright lights, soft, classical music, and people draped in expensive fabrics. But all of it faded into a blur. The only thing that felt real was Leo's hand, placed gently on the small of her back. He guided her forward with a quiet confidence, moving through the crowd as if this role was one he had played 1,000 times. Lina forced a smile, a brittle curve of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. This is just an act, she reminded herself, a performance for one night only. But her heart, that foolish, stubborn muscle in her chest, refused to listen. It hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that only she could hear. The whispers grew louder, and Lina caught snippets of conversations. Her name was tangled with words like, lucky, perfect match, and where did she find him? Each comment was a tiny pinprick against her composure, tightening the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Her relatives, who had always viewed her with a mix of pity and concern, rushed toward them. Their faces were alight with excitement and a newfound respect. They greeted Leo with an eagerness that bordered on awe. He handled it all with unnerving grace. He smiled politely, his handshake was firm, and his voice was a calm, charming melody as he answered their intrusive questions without revealing anything at all. Lina watched him, momentarily stunned. He was so natural in this world of wealth and blinding attention, a world she had always claimed she belonged to. He fit in more seamlessly than she ever had. When her aunt, a woman known for her lack of subtlety, asked how they met, Leo's eyes flickered to Lina for just a second. A slow smile spread across his face as he replied, "Destiny has a funny sense of timing, doesn't it?" The words were smooth, practiced, yet they felt intensely personal, as if they were a secret message meant only for her. Lina felt her breath catch in her throat. She remembered countless conversations where she had lamented her bad luck in love, her inability to find the right man. And here he was, spinning a tale of destiny that felt far too close to the truth. As they moved deeper into the grand hall, away from the prying eyes of her family, Leo leaned in, his voice a low whisper against her ear. "Just relax and trust me," he said. It wasn't a command, but a quiet assurance. His voice, steady and deep, sent a shiver down her spine, a confusing wave of relief and panic washing over her. She gave a small, jerky nod, pretending she was fine, that her racing mind wasn't spiraling out of control. Her thoughts drifted back to a time that felt like a different lifetime, a time when they had walked down cracked city sidewalks with empty pockets, their only currency the shared hope for a better future. He was just Leo then, not this polished, enigmatic figure who commanded respect without even trying. He was the man she had looked past, the one she deemed not ambitious enough, not wealthy enough, not enough. Now, standing here in this opulent hall, He was everything she had once foolishly declared she needed in a partner. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. She had been so blind, so focused on a checklist of superficial qualities that she had completely missed the treasure standing right in front of her. The shame burned in her cheeks, hotter than any spotlight. During the wedding ceremony, they sat in the front row, a perfect picture of a devoted couple. Leo took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers gently, a public display of affection that was both tender and calculated. His touch was careful, respectful, yet it sent a jolt of electricity through her. It was a fire that spread from her hand, up her arm, straight to her wildly beating heart. Lina watched him out of the corner of her eye, marveling at how comfortable he seemed, how effortlessly he played the part of the perfect, adoring partner. Was it all an act for him, too? Or was there something more behind those calm, unreadable eyes? Later, during the reception, a distant cousin of her father's slapped Leo on the back, laughing boisterously. "You're a lucky man, but Lina is even luckier to have found someone so successful," he exclaimed. Leo's smile didn't falter, but he glanced at Lina, a brief, intense look that she couldn't decipher. "Luck had nothing to do with it," he replied smoothly, his voice even. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. What did he mean? Was he talking about his success, or was he talking about them? The ambiguity was maddening. For the rest of the evening, Lina was on autopilot. She laughed at jokes she didn't hear, smiled for photos she would never want to see, and nodded through conversations that faded into background noise. Her entire being was focused on Leo. She started noticing the small things, the details only someone from his past would recognize. The subtle way he shifted his weight to avoid being in the center of a crowded group. The way he listened intently, his head tilted slightly, absorbing everything before speaking. And most telling of all, the way his smile would vanish the moment he thought no one was watching, replaced by a shadow of something she couldn't name, weariness, or maybe regret. Each tiny detail pulled her deeper into a vortex of confusion and longing. This wasn't some stranger she had hired for an evening. This was Leo. The Leo who knew her fears, who had witnessed her struggles, who had been a silent fixture in her past. He knew her world because he had once been a part of it. On the outside looking in, when the band started a slow song and the crystal dance floor filled with couples, Leo turned to her. He didn't speak, just extended his hand, his eyes asking the question. Lina's heart stuttered. For a fraction of a second, she hesitated, her mind screaming at her to run, to end this charade before it consumed her completely. But her body betrayed her. She placed her hand in his, the warmth of his palm, a familiar comfort. He led her onto the floor, and as he pulled her close, she felt trapped. Trapped between the illusion everyone saw the beautiful woman and her handsome, successful partner and the raw, painful reality her heart was screaming at her. She was living a fairy tale for an audience, but inside, she was standing face to face with a devastating truth she wasn't ready to accept. The man she had once so casually rejected, the man she had deemed unworthy, was now holding her in his arms. And this time, as they swayed to the music under the glittering chandeliers, she feared she was the one with nothing left to offer. The music slowed, and the dance floor became a sea of gentle movement. Couples swayed, lost in their own private worlds, but Lina couldn't find her footing. Her mind was a whirlwind, refusing to stay in the present moment. Leo's hand rested on her waist, a touch so light and careful it felt like he was holding his breath. Afraid to cross some invisible line? That careful distance, that polite space between them, hurt more than any passionate embrace would have. It was a clear, silent message that the past was a closed chapter. As they moved to the quiet melody, a small, seemingly insignificant thing happened. Lina's delicate bracelet, a gift from her wealthy husband, slipped from her wrist and clattered onto the polished floor. Before she could even register it, Leo bent down with a familiar grace, picking it up. His fingers, steady and sure, worked on the tiny, intricate clasp. He fixed it with the same calm patience he used to show years ago. Back when their lives were simple, when a broken clasp was a small crisis they would solve together, laughing. Lina's breath caught in her throat. That one simple, unconscious action shattered the fortress she had painstakingly built around her heart. All the justifications, all the reasons she'd told herself for leaving him, crumbled to dust. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, searching his face for a flicker of the man she once knew, for a sign that he felt it too. But Leo avoided her gaze. He kept his eyes focused on the task, his expression unreadable, as if he knew exactly the chaos he had just unleashed within her. The dance ended, and they returned to their seats, in a heavy silence. The joyous chatter of the wedding, the clinking of glasses, the celebratory music kit, all faded into a distant hum for Lina. Her heart was a drum beating against her ribs, a frantic rhythm of panic and regret. Her chest felt tight, constricted by unspoken words. She couldn't bear the polite fiction of being strangers any longer. Finally, the question she had been carrying all night, a heavy stone in her heart, spilled out. She turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. Have you ever loved someone who just left you behind? The question hung in the air between them, fragile and shimmering, like a spider's thread. For a long, agonizing moment, Leo stared straight ahead, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. The muscle in his cheek jumped. Then, he turned to her, his eyes meeting hers for the first time with a direct, piercing clarity. His voice was calm, almost detached, but underneath it, Lina could hear the deep, resonant echo of old pain. Yes, he said, I have. He paused, letting the word settle. And she taught me a very hard lesson. She taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. It just leaves scars. And she taught me that I would never, ever beg for someone to see my worth again. His words were not angry or accusatory. They were just a statement of fact, a truth he had lived and learned. But for Lina, they were a knife, slicing through her carefully constructed reality. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and sharp, but she forced them back. She would not break down here, not in front of him, not in this public space. She wanted to say his name, to say Leo in that soft, familiar way she used to, but fear and shame sealed her lips. What right did she have to speak his name with such intimacy now? Later that evening, as the crowd began to thin and the grand chandeliers seemed to burn a little too bright, Lina felt suffocated. Excuse me, she murmured, slipping away from the table. I just need some air. The cool night air hit her face, a welcome shock, but it did nothing to quiet the storm in her mind. Memories, long suppressed, rushed in with the force of a tidal wave. Late-night talks, filled with laughter and shared dreams. Promises whispered under the weak, flickering glow of cheap street lights. She remembered the exact moment, the exact look on his face, when she had told him he wasn't enough. Not ambitious enough, not wealthy enough, not enough for the grand life she envisioned for herself. She had looked at the earnest, loving man before her and seen only his limitations. Standing there now, draped in designer clothes, surrounded by the very luxury and wealth she had chased, Lina felt a profound, soul-crushing hollowness. The man she had once dismissed as weak now stood before her, strong, self-possessed, and impossibly distant. And she, in all her success, had never felt so small. A moment later, she heard footsteps on the gravel behind her. It was Leo. He didn't come to stand beside her, didn't wrap a jacket around her shoulders. He just stood a few feet away, a polite and unbreachable distance, his hands in his pockets. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't say a word. That silence, that complete lack of concern, was more damning than any accusation. It told her everything she needed to know. In that moment, Lina understood. This wasn't a coincidence. Fate, or whatever force governed their lives, hadn't brought him back to offer a second chance. It hadn't brought him back to comfort her in her unhappy marriage. It had brought him back to be a mirror, to show her the stark, unvarnished truth of the choice she had made all those years ago. And as she stood there in the cold night air, with the man she'd thrown away, standing just out of reach, Lina felt something inside her, finally, irrevocably break. Because she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that some regrets don't fade with time. Some mistakes don't just disappear. Sometimes, they come back, not to be fixed, but to remind you, in the most painful way possible, of what you lost. That night, after returning home, Lina could not sleep. The house was completely silent, but her mind was a storm, loud and restless. She lay in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, replaying every single moment with Leo again and again. His voice, the way his eyes held hers, the gentle way he fixed her broken bracelet, each memory felt like a clue, pushing her closer to a truth she had been desperately trying to avoid. Slowly, she sat up and reached for her phone. Her hands trembled as she opened old photo folders she hadn't dared to touch in years. Buried deep inside were pictures from another lifetime, a life she had deliberately left behind. There were smiling faces, simple clothes, cheap paper coffee cups, and one familiar face that made her heart ache with a pain she thought was long gone. She swiped through the old photos, her thumb hovering over his face, then looked at a picture she had discreetly taken of Leo earlier that day. She compared the man in the old pictures with the man she had just spent the entire day with. The same kind eyes, the same quiet, thoughtful expression, and there it was, the same faint scar near his eyebrow, a scar she had once touched with such care and tenderness. In that instant, all her doubts vanished, replaced by a crushing certainty. Leo was him. He was the man she had loved so deeply and then rejected so coldly. Tears started to slip down her cheeks, hot and unstoppable, as waves of guilt crashed over her. She remembered that day so clearly, how she had walked away without looking back. convincing herself she was being smart, strong, and practical. But in this quiet, lonely room, she felt neither smart nor strong. She just felt hollow. All she had done was run away from the best thing that had ever happened to her. And now, fate had brought him right back to her doorstep, wearing a suit and a price tag. The next morning, Lina met Leo in the hotel lobby as they had planned. He looked as composed and perfect as ever, dressed in a sharp suit, his demeanor calm and professional, almost distant. The way he greeted her felt so formal, like they were complete strangers meeting for the first time. That polite distance hurt more than any angry words could have, but strangely, it also gave her a sliver of courage. She needed to know. They sat across from each other at a small table, a cup of coffee between them that neither of them touched. The silence stretched on, thick with unspoken words. Finally, Lina gathered all her strength and asked the question that had been burning inside her all night. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Did you take this job? Because it was me?" For a long moment, Leo said nothing. His eyes rested on her face, his expression steady and completely unreadable. He just looked at her, and she felt like he was seeing right through her, past the expensive clothes and the confident facade she put on for the world. Then, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. Yes. He admitted that he had recognized her name on the client sheet immediately. He said fate had offered him a strange, unexpected chance, and he had decided to take it. He wasn't there for the money, he explained. He was there for closure. His words were calm, spoken in that even tone she now knew so well, but underneath the surface, she could feel the weight of years of buried pain. He told her he was curious. He wanted to see if she would recognize him, if she would be able to see the man she once knew beyond the expensive suit and the illusion of wealth. He wanted to know if the person she fell for was still visible beneath the polished exterior he had built. Listening to him, Lina felt her chest tighten until it was hard to breathe. A soft apology escaped her lips, her voice breaking as she told him how deeply wrong she had been, how she had let fear and insecurity guide her biggest decisions. She confessed that in all the years that had passed, she had never truly stopped thinking about him. The memory of what they had was a ghost that haunted her quietest moments. Leo listened to her entire confession without interrupting. His face remained calm, but the distance in his eyes seemed to grow. When she finally fell silent, her tearful apology hanging in the air between them, he told her the truth she had been dreading most. He said that a contract was still just a contract. Their arrangement was a business transaction, and his presence here was part of that job. He then said something that struck her to the core. He told her that some wounds don't heal simply because someone says they're sorry. He reminded her gently but firmly that the past cannot be rewritten. It can only be remembered. The choices they made back then had consequences, and those consequences were still very real. As he stood up to leave, his part of the contract fulfilled, Lina realized something with painful clarity. She had paid $2 for a fake boyfriend, a quick fix for a social problem. But the real cost, the true price of her actions, was standing right in front of her. It was the cost of facing the man whose heart she had once broken, and finally understanding the devastating truth that love, once lost, doesn't always come back just because you're finally ready for it. The past was a place she could visit in her memory, but she couldn't live there anymore, and neither could he. The day felt heavier after Leo's words, as if the truth itself had changed the very air around them. Lina followed him quietly as they left the hotel, a strange sense of confusion washing over her. She was no longer sure what she was allowed to feel. The contract, that cold piece of paper, said they still had time together, but nothing felt simple now. Every moment was layered with unspoken history, with the ghosts of what could have been. During the drive, the silence returned, filling the space between them again, but this time it was thicker, more suffocating than before. It wasn't an empty silence. It was filled with a decade of unasked questions and unshared heartbreaks. Lina finally broke it, her voice barely a whisper. She asked him, "How did your life change so much?" It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of everything she didn't know. Leo kept his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles wide on the steering wheel. He answered slowly, each word measured, as if he was carefully pulling it from a deep, guarded place. "After you left," he began, his voice low and steady, "I stopped dreaming, and I started working." He described a life devoid of color, of joy, of anything but relentless drive. He worked without rest, without hope, fueled only by a cold, hard determination to prove something to the world, and maybe to himself. He spoke of failure, not as a single event, but as a constant companion. He told her about the countless times he was knocked down, the doors slammed in his face, the nights he spent wondering if he was chasing an impossible goal. But he never quit. "Pain can do one of two things," he said, his gaze unwavering from the road ahead. "It can either break a person, or it can build them. For me, I think it did both. It broke the boy she knew, the dreamer with stars in his eyes. And from those broken pieces, it built the man sitting beside her, now a man, forged in fire. Strong, but scarred. Lina listened, the story of his struggle painting a vivid, painful picture in her mind. Tears began to fall silently down her cheeks, not just for his hardship, but for the profound and devastating role she had played in it. She finally understood. Her decision, made out of fear and immaturity all those years ago, had not just ended their relationship. It had fundamentally altered the course of his life, shaping him in ways she could never have imagined. The weight of that realization was crushing. When they reached a quiet, unassuming cafe nestled on a side street, Leo pulled over. "Let's stop for a moment," he suggested. It was a simple place, with mismatched chairs and the warm scent of coffee in the air. A world away from the five-star luxury that now defined his life. The choice felt deliberate, meaningful. It felt like a return to something real, something honest. Sitting across from each other at a small wooden table, the past and the present finally collided with an undeniable force. The sterile pretense of their contractual arrangement melted away, leaving only two people and a chasm of unspoken history between them. Lina, emboldened by a desperate need for honesty, finally spoke her truth. "I never meant to hurt you," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I was just scared. I let fear control all of my choices back then." She admitted that she had confused the comfortable, predictable path with true happiness, sacrificing their love for a sense of security that ultimately left her feeling empty. Leo looked at her then, truly looked at her, for what felt like the first time since they had met again. The mask of the cool, detached billionaire was gone. In his eyes, she saw a flicker of the man he used to be, and the pain he still carried. "I understand fear, Lina," he said softly, but his words offered no comfort. "But understanding doesn't erase the pain." He then reminded her of that one specific night, the one that had haunted him for years. The night she had looked him in the eye and said he wasn't enough. He told her how those words had stayed with him, a constant echo in his mind, sharper and more persistent than hunger or the sting of failure. That was what finally broke her. The memory, his words, the raw pain in his voice, it was too much. Lina broke down completely, the sobs she had been holding back shaking her entire body. Through her tears, she made one last, desperate confession. "I loved you," she choked out. "I loved you so much. And maybe I still do." The words hung in the air, risky and fragile, but they were the most honest thing she had said in a decade. Leo stood up slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. His expression was no longer angry, but it was firm, resolute. He looked down at her, a profound sadness in his eyes. "Lina," he said, his voice quiet but final. "Love spoken too late becomes a question, not a promise." He told her that he had spent years building a life where he didn't need anyone to choose him anymore. He had become his own foundation, his own fortress. He had learned to be enough for himself. As they left the cafe and walked back to the car, Lina felt the immense weight of every single second she had wasted in the past. Every day she had spent in comfortable numbness. Every moment she had been too afraid to follow her heart. The contract was almost over. And with its end, she realized, would come the end of this fleeting, painful chance to say everything she should have said long ago. She finally understood that this meeting, this bizarre contractual reunion, was never about pretending to be in love. It was about facing the undeniable truth of what she had lost. It was a mirror held up to her past self, forcing her to see the consequences of her choices. And now, with only hours left, she had to decide. Did she have the courage to fight for a love she had once thrown away? Or would she let it slip through her fingers for a second and final time? The evening air was cool, almost chilly, as Lina and Leo walked along the quiet street. They were far from the bright lights and the noisy celebration of the wedding, cocooned in a bubble of silence that felt both comforting and tense. The city around them seemed almost unreal, like a backdrop in a play, a pause in time that existed only for the two of them. Lina's heart was a drum against her ribs, a frantic rhythm caught between a desperate hope and a crippling fear. She wanted to reach out, to close the small distance between them, to finally say all the words she had swallowed down for years. But something held her back, an invisible wall built from past mistakes and unspoken regrets. Just as the silence began to feel unbearable, Leo stopped walking. He turned to face her, his body silhouetted against a distant streetlight. His expression was calm, almost unnervingly so, a mask that hid whatever turmoil might be churning beneath. But his eyes held a depth, a darkness that made her chest tighten with a familiar ache. "The day is almost over," he said, his voice soft, but carrying the weight of a final judgment. "The contract ends tonight." The words hit Lina like a physical blow. Her stomach dropped, and the air rushed from her lungs. She had known, of course she had known, that this charade had an expiration date. But hearing him say it, Hearing him draw the line so clearly in the sand made it terrifyingly real. Then what? She managed to ask, her voice a trembling whisper that was nearly lost to the night air. For the first time all day, Leo's gaze softened, a fleeting warmth that was gone as quickly as it appeared. Some loves come back, he said slowly, each word chosen with deliberate care, and some lessons stay with us forever. A sharp pang of fear shot through Lina. What did he mean? Was this all it had ever been for him? A game of revenge? A carefully constructed lesson to make her feel the same pain he once felt? Or was there something more? Did he still care for her, in a way that defied words and logic? Leo, please, she whispered, taking a small, hesitant step closer. The distance between them was now charged with years of history. I never stopped thinking about you. I made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. I want a chance, just one chance, to make things right. He looked at her in silence, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable once more. She could feel him weighing her words, measuring them against years of hurt, against the ghost of the boy she had left behind. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, unbearable yet filled with a universe of unspoken meaning. In that moment, Lina realized this was never just a fake relationship for a day. It was a crossroads, a collision of past and present, and she could no longer hide from the truth of what she had done, or what she still felt. Finally, Leo spoke again, his voice low but steady, cutting through the silence like a blade. You see me now, Lina? You see what I became? But can you see me beyond who I was before? Can you love me without the shadows of the past haunting us? Her heart pounded in her ears, a frantic, desperate rhythm. Every step, every word from him was a strange and painful mix of hope and dread. She had imagined this moment for years, played it over and over in her dreams. But reality was so much heavier, so much more dangerous. Could love truly survive when the past had inflicted such deep wounds? Could she ever prove that her heart had genuinely changed? Lina looked into Leo's eyes, searching for a sign, for anything to hold on to. And for a split second, she saw it, a flicker of something she had once known so well. A trace of the love they had shared, a hint of the boy she had so carelessly left behind. But it was buried deep beneath layers of pride and pain. The question still hung between them, unanswered. Tonight, everything would be decided. Here, on this silent street, with the distant city lights flickering like scattered stars, Lina knew she had a choice to make. She could confess everything, lay her soul bare, and risk losing him forever. Or she could walk away again, just as she had before, and let regret become a permanent shadow over her life. The suspense was a tangible thing, a sharp and unyielding knife poised between them. Neither moved, neither spoke. It was a quiet, desperate battle of love and pride, of past and future. And only the next words would determine who would win, or if, in the end, they would both lose everything. What do you think she should do? Should she risk it all for a chance at redemption? Or is the countless moments she had wished for a time machine to take her back to the day she walked away? Now, standing face to face with him again, she realized that time had finally run out. There were no more do-overs, no more second chances to get it right. This was it. Her lips trembled as she willed her feet to move, taking a single, hesitant step closer. Leo, the name escaped her lips as a whisper, her voice cracking under the strain of years of unspoken words. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable, and a chaotic mix of fear, hope, and raw desperation churned inside her. She had to say it. She had to make him understand. I don't need a rich man, she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength as her eyes locked onto his. I need you. I've never stopped needing you. The words hung in the cold night air, stripped bare of all pretense, raw and painfully honest. For the first time all night, Leo's eyes softened. Just for a fleeting second, the guarded man before her vanished, and in his place, Lina saw the boy she had once loved so fiercely, at the boy she had foolishly walked away from. He took a slow step forward, deliberately closing the small distance that separated them. The rigid tension in his face began to melt, replaced by something warmer, something vulnerable, something human. It gave her a flicker of courage. But just as she opened her mouth to speak again, to pour out everything she had kept locked away, he paused. He looked at her with a quiet, piercing intensity that seemed to see right through her. Lina, he said, his voice low but perfectly steady, cutting through the silence. I've waited a long time for honesty, not excuses. Are you ready to face everything you left behind? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the stillness. Was she ready? Could she ever be ready to confront the wreckage of her own mistakes? But looking into his eyes, she knew there was only one answer. She nodded, the tears she'd been holding back, finally streaming freely down her cheeks. No longer a sign of weakness, but of surrender. She was done running. She was done hiding. Leo reached out, his movements slow and deliberate, and gently took her hands in his. That simple touch, skin on skin, was electric. It was a bridge across the chasm of years, carrying the weight of unspoken feelings, of silent forgiveness, and of a love that had refused to die. In that single, breathtaking moment, the past and the present collided. All the foolish reasons she had left him, pride, ambition, fear, they all evaporated into insignificance. Lina finally understood. Love wasn't about wealth or perfect timing. It was about courage. It was about honesty. It was about the terrifying, exhilarating willingness to take a chance, no matter how high the risk. Leah pulled her close, and she let herself fall into his embrace. Resting her head on his shoulder, she felt the warmth she had once so coldly rejected, a warmth that was now undeniably real, solid, and alive. It felt like coming home. The city night seemed to hold its breath, a silent witness to the reunion of two hearts that fate had so cruelly tested for years. The story of their future wasn't written in the stars that night. The script didn't spell out every detail of what would come next. But one truth hung in the air, as clear and bright as the moon above. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't defined by the first choice we make, but by the courage we find to choose again. It felt as though the camera of life had paused on this perfect, fragile frame, leaving everyone watching with one lingering question: had destiny finally granted them the second chance they both so deeply deserved? And in that quiet, moonlit moment, wrapped in his arms, Lina knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never let him go again. Thanks so much for watching this story unfold. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. See you in the next one.